question. Okay, I'm going to ask the question again, and Horowitz is going to be quiet. When a person thinks through the Bina process, what will certainly come out in the end? What's the answer?
Full idea.
A full idea, wrong answer. True, but not enough. What's the answer? An opinion, a judgment. Now, why? 89. Why must that be the inevitable end? It's a gewaldige kasha. Why can't a person be objective?
Everyone's brains either lean towards chassid or gevura.
Because everyone needs one way.
I could kiss him. I could just kiss him. This guy Horowitz over here. The teacher's dream. He mamish knows. He pushes his heel and listens, and he just knows. The answer to the question is, I might as well waste time because that's what I do for a living. How old is broadcast news? How old is the concept of daily news? In one way, it's very old, and the other way, it's mamish yesterday. It's not that long that technology allows us such rapid communication. Something happens today, and tomorrow the world knows about it. 1911. Okay, we got a date.
That was full coverage 24/7, or that was just
1911. He just made that number up, right?
no.
Here's the deal. They used to believe in objective reporting. That a reporter gives the facts without an opinion, right? I mean, this is before my time, but the personality that they associated with objective reporting was a man by the name of Walter Cronkite. You ever heard of Walter Cronkite? Imagine being named Cronkite. My name is Joseph Gesund. Krankheit means disease in Yiddish, for those who don't understand German. That was his name, Walter Cronkite. He was a reporter. He turned the United States he turned America against the Vietnam War. Because he went to Vietnam and he happened to be there with the Tet Offensive. And it changed him. Now, we can debate whether he's right or wrong. But can a person report news without telling you how they feel about that news? That's the question.
If they didn't write it down, then yeah, it's not. Yes.
Oh, well, naturally. If a person is collecting news and communicating news...
Depends how complicated the news is.
Where are you going? Okay, go.
He doesn't use.
You're ready. Without any on the way there?
He doesn't use it.
There still is that belief. You know, CBS, NBC, ABC, they will say to you, we're reporting news objectively.
Theoretically.
Objectively, right.
Theoretically, if the guy doesn't use Bina, if
objective
the guy
is
just gets the facts, he sees what they are, and then sends them over that, I can understand that. Not even bothering to look at it or whatever.
It's not the actual.
No, say I look at you and I say, I'm Remy sitting in a chair opposite me. I never thought to understand it, that's a fact. That's fairly objective, yeah? But if I actually sort of understood why you're sitting here and have an opinion, basically, and then it'd be a bit very hard to...
And the fact that there was a sweater on the chair,
Yeah.
which we moved to please Ad and Shmuel,
You get the idea.
and we don't know who the sweater belongs to, it gets tricky. They said, Yitzhak David, could you please close the door? I don't get it, man.
Yo, YG!
I don't think he.
You have no awareness of yourself.
I don't think he gets it.
Open the door.
Get it.
I think he left the door open. Yeah, she thought she was standing there.
Now, anyway, here's the bottom line. Torah says it's impossible. Torah says it's impossible. But you know, in my lifetime, what you watch happening is news outlets becoming more and more shameless about offering bias. In other words, if you go back to the 60s, I think they tried very hard to say the truth. It's impossible to do. That's the point.
Is it something you should aim for, even if you can't achieve it? As close to it as possible.
If you're a news reporter, you should.
Right.
But the point is,
You can't really
the
get-
message where this Maimon is giving, at least the way I'm teaching it to you, it's impossible. It can't be. And admitting that is the most important step in possibly achieving it. You know? If you say, I am a person, and there's no way I can report news without introducing how I feel about news, can't be. But if you actually tell yourself that you can be an objective reporter, and it's not true, in other words, when you're lying to yourself, then your subjectivity is never acknowledged. Or to say it in different words, you truly believe that your bias is the truth. So what's happening in America today, you still have the big sources of news, and then nobody trusts them. I don't know what's going on because I don't really follow, but that's what I understand. Everyone's looking for alternative sources of news, and the alternative sources of news aren't any better. They just say, listen, we're not trying to say it objectively. This is our bias. In my head, I was sitting in my taxi coming here, thinking about the idea of news being reported at least by two people. If you want the truth, you have to have two people whose leanings are different, and you get a chance to make your own judgment. If one person tells you his opinion, it's impossible for a person to think something through from the beginning to the end without having an opinion. And Levi, that's the point. A person who thinks something completely, if you haven't thought it through, then you also have an opinion, but it'll be flawed. If you thought something through from the beginning to the end, younger manchik, me'eshleim. Your friends hide it underneath the table. They put it here. The reason the Chassidus gives why when a person thinks something through, they can have a judgment is because they have a personality. The beginning of every human being is their essence. Let's use that quotation, okay? The essence of the human being is not objective. The essence of the human being has a leaning. Some people's nature is to chesed, some people's nature is to gevura, and when you think something through from the beginning till the end, that judgment will come out. And that's the answer to questions 88 and 89. The answer to question 88 is one word. When a person thinks something through in the beginning process, what will certainly come out in the end? The answer is an opinion, a bias. 89. Why must that be the inevitable end? The answer is because your personality comes out. And nobody's personality includes all midas. One person's personality is chesed, another person's personality is gevura. And even though you're being intellectual and you're being objective, being honest, your leaning emerges from your ideas. So as I explained it to you in class, okay, well let's do 90 and 91. Okay, 90 and 91 were examples. This is a class from Wednesday last, right? What example did I give you from two political systems for this? I gave the example from a socialist system and from a capitalist system, right? They're philosophies. They really should be economic philosophies. Unfortunately, they become very entangled. But they're philosophies. One philosophy says, if you let the rich get as rich as they possibly can, they'll create jobs for all the poor. It's called the laws of the marketplace. In other words, if people are allowed to make money, everybody will gain. Now, some people are going to get very, very rich. But in order to be rich and stay rich, they have to employ people. Is that true or false?
It's true, but the question doesn't always work.
It doesn't work.
The answer is it's true to an extent. And this was the end of the 19th century. In the beginning of the 20th century, we lived in a world where what they called the robber barons, some people became very, very rich, and many, many, many people suffered. They went to work in their factories. If there were accidents, there was no workers' compensation, there was no minimum wage, there were no laws against child labor, for example, or rules of how a workplace has to be protecting the workers. They had no rules. Huh?
The 30s, 20s and 30s?
No, the 1890s and the 1910s and the 1920s. It went on for a long time. There's famous stories of fires where people died.
So the famous one was the Jewish woman.
That's right, in Manhattan.
Yeah.
Now, what's the alternative? A socialist system. What's a socialist system? It's called redistribution of wealth. You take money from the rich, you give it to the poor. Redistribution of wealth. In other words, you say everybody has to have enough. And INF, it's not fair. It's true, it isn't fair. But it isn't fair because some people take from others. Because some people are more resourceful, some people are more creative, some people are more aggressive. Rich people are not rich because they're thieves necessarily. They're rich because they're motivated and they're gifted and they're talented and selfish. That's true. So it's an interface, So the socialist system, which is about giving poor people, so when you take so let's answer the question. Does it make sense for the government to get involved in business and control the marketplace so that the poor people are looked after to a certain extent? They're protected from harm, and they have a minimum wage, and there's laws of the marketplace, and there's workers' compensation in case of injury, and all kinds of other systems. Is that a good idea? The answer to that question is sure, to an extent. If you let that system go amok, it defeats itself, because if people are not able to profit, people can't make money, people are not motivated to work hard, and the system collapses. So where's the truth? The truth is in the middle. So every system has its true points. No system by itself is true enough to sustain itself. It's just not possible. So this was the first example that I gave you in class. What is the truth? The truth is business people be allowed to make money. And the truth is that people have to be looked after. The government has to interfere. What is the balance? We're looking for it. And the nature of politics. You know what the nature of politics is? The nature of politics? What the nature of politics? Does anybody know the nature of politics? In the scheme of this conversation, what's the nature? The nature of politics, the people are pulled to extremes. Everybody knows that the truth is in the middle. But if you want to get elected, you need to be hysterical. If you're in the middle, you're not attractive as a candidate. That's just how the game works. If you're one of those people who comes along and says, I think there needs to be a balance between allowing rich people to make money and to look after poor people, it's the truth. But you're boring. That's right. You have to either say, we're all for business, or you have to say, we're worried about the underprivileged in a way which is uncontrollable, uncontained. And so that's why politics pulls people in extreme directions, and people get crazy with it. People lose their minds. Look at this is the reality. The reality is that the truth is in the center. The reality is that many politicians who run for public office know that. But the reality also is that the politicians who run for public office need to get elected first. And to get elected, you have to say a lot of things you don't mean. You have to do things that get you crazy. That's the system. Churchill said once, the democratic system is the worst, it's a terrible system of government. It's just the best man has ever devised. That's the simple truth. The democratic system allows weirdos in the shugayim to be elected, and responsible, normal people can't get elected. Why? Because they refuse to take extremes. That's the system. I think it is. Anyway, that's the facts. The facts are everybody has a bias. Bina says you have a bias. Bina says you have a bias. If you understand something completely, you have an opinion about it. Now, question 91. What example did I give you for this lahadus from Torah? Okay, it says that I give you. Did I give you? Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Right, that's the answer. Right? How did Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argue?
They argued, tried to prove each other wrong and failed. They both were right.
What did you say?
What was it?
It was always. See, so you know what you just revealed? That you like Beis Hillel better than Beis Shammai. Because if you were a Beis Shammai-like person, you would say Beis Hillel is always extreme. He always wants to give you an excuse to be matir. And Beis Shammai wanted to be reasonable. You see what just happened? Isn't that interesting? It's human nature. We all do it all the time.
Wait, is it the person who you say is extreme?
Huh?
You're the person who you say is extreme?
Say that again.
You say he goes for Beis Shammai?
He just said Beis Shammai always goes to an extreme, and Beis Hillel tries to find leniency. So I said to him, you just played your own hand. Because if his nature was towards Beis Shammai, he would have said, Beis Hillel is looking for an extreme way to be mata things, and Beis Shammai is being reasonable.
I don't think it's his bias, I think that's Chassidus' bias.
Okay, that's your bias also. And maybe it's my bias also. It's just how people are. Here's the point of the conversation, okay? We talk about learning Torah. And learning Torah means you have to want the truth. You know the old story, if you can get a bullseye every time you shoot an arrow. How?
Just target.
First shoot the arrow and make a circle around it. That's not right. If a person is truly objective, they look for the truth. If you're looking for the truth, you have to go wherever the truth is going to take you. You're studying Torah. If you will know already what the Torah is going to hold before the conversation starts, you're not learning Torah. And your whole psak, your whole foundation is a falsehood. Right? If you want to paskin a halacha correctly, you need to learn the Torah. If the Torah says something you don't like, you're going to say it anyway because the Torah is the truth. So you have to put aside your bias. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel did not come into the Beis HaMedrash knowing what the psak is going to be. Because if they did that, they wouldn't be Tanaim HaMirayim, they'd be Ganovim. Many years ago, a guy told me this. I don't know if this is true or not. But I knew a guy who was a shliach, and he was telling me about how the news stations say that they called up Stanford University and they asked them their opinion about this or that or the other, the academics in these different schools. They'll quote different schools. We got the report from Stanford University. He says, if you would see how that happens, he says they call up the school, they get some student on the phone, and the student puts his hand over the receiver. He says, what should I tell the guy on the phone? And whatever they want to say, they say. In other words, the way he described it to me, the whole thing is a joke. It either is or it isn't. But the point is, if somebody gives you their opinion, it's their opinion. But at least they have to want the truth. Beis Hillel, when it learned Torah, didn't say, how do we make it kosher? Beis Hillel said, what does the Torah say? When Beis Shammai approached the Torah, Beis Shammai didn't say, how do we make this teif? They said, what does Torah say? But when they thought about it till the very end, Beis Hillel, if there was a way to make it kosher, made it kosher. And Beis Shammai, if there was a way to say that it's not kosher, said it wasn't kosher. But it was all logical. Otherwise it wouldn't be Torah. It's nonsense. But that's not the end of the story.
So what point does that take place? Wouldn't be enough.
Each Talmud Chacham had to think through the Shiloh with their own mind. They learned the Torah, they argued. They sat in rooms full of people. And the advantage of arguing is that everybody heard everybody else's points of view. And then each one, they were smart, they were educated, thought, till they came to their own opinion. Huh?
So then how do you explain the story where they locked the Rav in the attic?
Not the Rav, a bunch of Rabbon. So they should argue it out. They should come to Piskei Dinim.
No, they didn't let Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai lock.
They used to vote, so they still was with more people, but then at time Beis Shammai won because they locked the thing and they didn't come to the vote.
Yeah. Okay, I don't know how to answer that question. At least not at the moment. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to do with that. Ich weiß nicht.
Well, technically,
but the Shas was written by people who knew all of this. In other words, when the halacha was written, the poil, it wasn't written by the people who locked the other people in the attic. It was written by people who knew both sides of that story.
They already passed halacha, that's why they can change it. That was the whole point.
You can change a halacha. A halacha can be changed. Halachas are not binding forever. It's hard to change a halacha. But I don't know. I honestly don't know what to do with that story. I'm just telling you how I understand the cloud, how the debates worked. But I owe you an answer. You're asking me a very pointed question, which deserves an answer. And we have to leave it on the shelf because my answer to you right now is I don't know. Okay, this is how you learn it in the Samach Vav. The Samach Vav has arichas of Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. And this is it's my motto. A big discussion. And this is the impression that you get from the Machlekes and Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Every member of Beis Hillel thought for himself. They talk, but they came to their own conclusions. And then every member of Beis Shammai talked and no conclusions. And then the group of people of Beis Hillel, the group of people of Beis Shammai would paskin. Now wait, that's not the end of the story. Then Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai would argue. And the way these arguments work is very simple. If Beis Hillel can show that Beis Shammai made a mistake in their reasoning, Rabbi Silverberg.
Lonely.
I can't have him wandering around the room. I just can't have it. Where's everybody going, by the way? Where's this Mitzrayim?
MetLife Stadium.
Who?
MetLife Stadium. It's a football game. They're doing a sign outside to get film focus.
MetLife is here in Brooklyn?
Yeah, it's a football stadium.
I'm a Brooklyn. Yeah.
So this is a new Seder every Sunday morning. The guys go Mitzrayim to the football stadium.
When they're in town.
Who's them?
Team.
What's the name of the team?
Jets, Giants.
Whose idea is this?
We've been doing this.
Every Sunday morning, guys go to the ball game.
Well, during the season.
Never during the town.
The season is on.
During the season when they're in town.
Yeah, okay, so this is very interesting to me. Okay.
No, it's not.
I have to. The Frek sehr good. The Frek sehr good. I owe you one. When Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai argued, Beis Hillel's leaning towards Chesed came from their understanding. In other words, the reason it was Torah is not because they decided this. The reason it was Torah because they proved from the Torah their leaning. Or to say it more precisely, Beis Hillel learned Torah. And they understood the Torah with their mind. When Beis Hillel learned Torah and learned Torah with their mind, when they finished understanding it, they had a judgment, they had a bias. But the judgment didn't come from their intellect, the judgment from their nefesh.
They also learned it on a different level. Like I remember Kaczynski was explaining to us that either Beis Hillel or Beis Shammai learned it on like a theoretical level, and the other one learned it for a more practical level. Where they have like.
You mean Beis Hillel versus Beis Shammai?
Yeah.
Okay, but that's part of this. It's a part of this idea that the personalities of Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai play into their psak.
Really, what's the ends for 93?
But we'll get to 93 in a minute. So 91, what example did I give you for this lyhadus from Torah? Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argue. Beis Hillel was looking for the truth. Beis Shammai was looking for the truth intellectually. But because of their bias, their personality bias, Beis Hillel would end up with a chesed bias, and Beis Shammai would end up with a gvura bias, and then they would argue with each other. You must understand that. Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai didn't only argue with themselves, they argued with each other. If Beis Hillel could show Beis Shammai that there was a flaw to their logic, there was no machlokes. The only time there was a machlokes to Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, where Beis Hillel could not show that Beis Shammai was wrong, and Beis Shammai could not show that Beis Hillel was wrong. In other words, both systems were true. Beis Hillel's approach to this question was thought through till the end, and Beis Shammai could not prove them wrong. Beis Shammai's system of logic was thought through till the end. Beis Hillel could not prove them wrong. So they each one held their position, and that became a machlokes. And by the way, you know the beginning of this? The beginning of this is part of the tragedy, and it doesn't answer your question about it. I really owe you an answer. I really owe you an answer, but the concept of binding Teresh Bapeh, as we know it, goes back to the Anshe Sagdola. Anshe Sagdola lived between the first and second Beis HaMikdash, and into the very beginning of the second Beis HaMikdash. The last of Anshe Sagdola was Shimon HaTzadik. He was a Kohen Gadol at the beginning of the second Beis HaMikdash. He passed away 40 years after the second Beis HaMikdash was erected. He was considered the last of Anshe Sagdola. After him was his student Antignes, and Antignes, his students, created the division in the Jewish world. Right, the Anshe Sagdola made all kinds of changes, huge changes. They were the real reformers in Jewish history. The Anshe Sagdola. So, but as long as Shimon HaTzadik was alive, nobody could say a word. Shimon HaTzadik passes away. His Talmud, Antignes Ish Seiche, succeeds him. And the students of Antignes Ish Seiche decided that they want to question the decisions that Anshe Sagdola made. And their names are famous, Tzaddik Ubaitis, the source of the Tzdukim and the Baitusim. And they wanted to go back to things before the Anshe Sagdola made the change. So there became a huge division. Time of the second Beis Hamikdash was a very, very tumultuous time because there were so many different groups of Jews who had different versions of Judaism. So the Sanhedrin, the people who were protecting the emes of Torah, made two leaders. That's what you have in the Mishnah. Yossi ben Yezen, Yossi ben Yechanan, Yeshua ben Brachin, Ite Arveli, Shmai and Naftali, and Hillel and Shammai. Each generation had two leaders. One was called the Nasi, and one was called the Av Bezdin. And the reason they had two leaders is one had to get involved in politics. They couldn't stay just in Torah because the world did not allow Rabbanim to sit and learn. There was so much tumult. If they were going to protect Torah, they had to get involved in things outside of Torah. So the Gemara says that from the times of Antigonus Ishech, from the times of the Zugis, till Hillel and Shammai, who were about 100 years before the Churban, there was one machlokes. One! And the Gemara says what the machlokes was, the machlokes about Smicha, and who held what. The Nasi held one thing, and the Abbez held another thing. What does that prove? What does that prove? They didn't argue less, but they would disagree. They had big yeshivas, time of the second Beis Hamikdash, big yeshivas, and in the best of times, it was pushed in Yerushalayim, in the Lishkas HaGozis, and they would sit and argue. And each person brought his bias. Not because they were not being intellectually objective, they were using their brains to interpret the Torah, but as I keep on emphasizing, the whole point of Bina is when you think something through till the end, you will have a judgment, because your nefesh has a judgment. The Eibush to put into your soul a judgment. Wait, so what happened? They argued and 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 they argued until they convinced each other. Which made them two things. Number one, smarter, but that's not the big deal. Number two, better listeners. Right? To use the expression of the Gemara, if you're a properly trained student, which is called Talmid Sheshimish Kol Tzorkoi, a student who is Shimish, you know what the word Shimish means? He sat by teachers and learned from them. There's a phenomenon in Jewish law called Shimush. To be a Rav, it's not enough to have smicha. To be a Rav, you have to have smicha, not to learn. But you have to sit by a practicing Rav and serve him. Watch how he paskins. And the biggest Rabbanim have Shimush for years and years. Some of the biggest Rabbanim sat by their teachers for 10 years, 50 years, 20 years. And you see how a Rav thinks of paskins. If you have more Shimush, you understand the process of halacha deeper. So the Chazal say when there were Talmidim sheshimshu kol tzarkom, when the students had adequate shimush, the most significant difference was they knew how to listen. So they had a group of Chachamim into a room, Sanhedrin, Gedei Yisrael, Rabban, and Poskim. And when they had shilas, they argued. But they were able to come to a consensus. You know what the word consensus means? No, a unanimous conclusion. They all agreed. There was one issue they couldn't come to, they couldn't come to an achdos. But aside for that, they argued once. Hillel and Shammai argued how many times? Their entire life? 3. Yeah, the Mishnah, the beginning of Adius. Hillel and Shammai have 3 machlokes. That's it. Every other time Hillel and Shammai argued, they came to a conclusion. They were the Nasi and Abbez. Hillel was the Nasi. Listen. Shammai was the Abbez. And they would argue like cats and dogs. Like Hillel and Shammai. And either Hillel would convince Shammai or Shammai, except for 3 issues that they argued. But then came Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. And Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai still screaming at each other. You know the reason? They were tzadis. So they gave smicha to students who didn't have enough shimush. And practically speaking, that means they had a difficulty listening to each other. So when they argued, they couldn't come to a place where they could hear each other out and come to a consensus, so they stayed in a machlokes. And Beis Hillel would argue with Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai would try to prove Beis Hillel wrong, and they couldn't. Beis Hillel would argue with Beis Shammai, try to prove Beis Shammai wrong, and they couldn't. So both days stand. When both days stand, then you have what's called the machlokes, and you have Achei Temimim. You follow the majority. Had they been smarter and deeper and better trained, again, the way I see it in my life, and the way I see it in the world, one of the most difficult things to do as a person and as an intellectual is listen. I think about myself in yeshiva. I was constantly screaming at my chavrusas. And my chavrusas were screaming at me and making fun of me. I think now, if I had learned how to listen, and my chavrus had learned how to listen to me, our learning would have been more peaceful, it would have been more conclusive, more decisive, and it would have been clearer. But you get stuck. And why do you get stuck? Because you don't have the training to know how to listen. And what's nuts about it is, most of Teresh Ba'Peh is based on these machlekes in the Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Because the Eibush set up the system that you have to listen to the Chachamim in your generation. And in the generation of Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, that was the reality. And many halachas are based on the machlekes and Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, where you could say in theory, if they were smarter, if they listened better, they'd come to a consensus. So why should we listen to them? And the answer is, but that's what the Eibush said, the halachas like that generation's Chachamim. But to make the point that's negated to us is, if you understand something, you will have a bias. If you understand something, you see something through to the end, you're going to have a bias. You're going to have a bias. It's not going to be the other way. And if you argue with somebody else, so your bias doesn't mean that you're not using your brain. You are using your brain. You're trying to understand the Torah. Your bias means that when you understand the Torah, you're going to feel a certain way about the Torah. Another person's going to learn the same thing, and they're going to feel about that thing differently than you. Now, what's supposed to happen, you're supposed to argue, and until one of you convinces the other. If neither convince the other, then you have what's called the machlekes. You understand? But this is the pshat, that bina, the way I understand it. When you understand something completely, you will have an opinion. I am in a conversation with a person. I'm not going to say who that person is, but someone that I'm involved with. And we always argue. And every time we argue, we get into trouble. Which I hate. I used to argue about everything. I don't like to argue. I really don't like to argue with people. I want to listen to people, and I want to be heard. And when I'm talking to a person, I feel they're not listening, or I find myself not listening to them, which happens, it's really inefficient. It's foolish. And I realized something. I said to this person, my friend, I said, I want to do me a favor. Anytime we talk about an issue, tell me what you think. And they said, well, I'm not sure what I think. I said, if you're not sure what you think, why should I tell you what I think? Tell me what you think, even if it's not so. Let's agree that we have an opinion. Then we can decide which opinion is true. You think something through. Now, sometimes the truth is you don't know. But if you don't know, how do you know the other guy's wrong? You don't know. So Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai had an opinion. You cannot help but have a bias. Okay, questions or comments? I'm talking too long on this subject. Okay, question 92. What is the source of these biases? The answer is your personality, which is your previous, your neshama. That's question number 22. 92. Okay, 93. According to what you said in question 92, what integrity does your opinion have? In other words, if you study halacha, you study Torah, you study Gemara, which is the source of halacha, you're studying the psukim really, and when you understand the Torah, your neshama's bias leads you in the direction of chesed, or leads in the direction of gevura, that makes the whole thing, it's not Torah, right? If a person decides before he learns what the psak din is going to be, my grandfather, I'm looking at him, told me a mice.
He doesn't need to fit the process of thought into his, the goal that he wants to have. He can just have his personality be the driving factor of how his thought process works.
Correct. Let me talk it through. What you're saying is true. My grandfather was a very special Jew. He was my grandfather, so of course he was special. He was mine, yeah. So he was once called to jury duty, and it was a case of an insurance company. There was a libel, a suit, because there was some kind of an accident and someone was suing the insurance company. And I've gone to jury duty a number of times. You go, you sit, and you hope they don't call you. I've been in jury, they call you, and then you sit a whole day, and they call you, and you fill out papers. Usually they just send you home. But sometimes you get put on a case, a trial. So he was called to jury duty, and they asked you questions. Have you ever had a bad experience with the insurance company? Because it's a case of insurance against someone who is suing the insurance company, and they don't want you to go into the case with a bias. So they know me and the insurance company are best friends. Have you ever had a case where you had the liability, but you were hurt and in an accident. And no. So a bunch of people sitting in a room, and the two lawyers are sitting there, and the judge is there. However, these things are done, and they ask you, do you have a bias? One word, nobody has a bias. My grandfather told me. So he was there, and he joined the jury pool. The minute they walked out, the minute the lawyers walked out and the judge walked out, the room erupted. I'm going to make the insurance company lose. I hate insurance companies. The case hadn't even started. They already poskened. My grandfather is sitting there, and I can't believe what just happened. Because the lawyers came in and they asked you a question. If you have a bias, you don't have to sit on the case. Just say the truth. If you don't like insurance companies, if you like insurance companies, pay high policies, don't sit on a jury. Because the whole idea is the jury of your peers, they're going to judge you and you can get objective versions, whatever the... So when they came back in, my grandfather raises his hand, and my grandfather says, he saw what happened. All the people already passed, they didn't even hear the first detail of the case, they already knew who was going to win. Unbelievable. So he said, I want to excuse myself. He says, why? On religious grounds. He came up with something, he didn't want to say what just happened, but it was obscene. It was shameless, They all knew what was going to happen. That's not halacha, that's Baba Maises.
They didn't have cameras, like they don't have recordings,
They don't care.
I don't know. The point is, that's not how Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argue. It's not how Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argue. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, the answer to question 93 is, where is the integrity? The integrity is Beis Hillel is trying to look for the truth with his brain. Beis Shammai is trying to look for the truth with his brain. He can't help but have a bias. But it's not that his bias takes away his brain.
It's yours.
Huh?
It's yours.
It's... Your opinion means any one of the Piskei, one of the ones. Your opinion means Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai.
And 94 is they couldn't prove each other wrong.
93.